It's time to get nerdy, y'all.
A little bit of gaming history for you.
Something relevant in gaming and discuss our opinions on it.
Should we kick it out of here, or should we kick-start it?
This is the part where you, the listeners, try to stump the hosts.
I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on a podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's Tuesday, January 23rd, 2024, and you know what that means. It's time to get nerdy, y'all. Welcome to episode number 294 of Two Nerds in a Pod, the nerdiest video game podcast in the galaxy. I am Lam, also known as Mr. Nice Guy, and I'm joined by my comrade in gaming commentary, the Miggity Mac, also known as Maction. Mac, we did not record last week. It's been 2 weeks. How are you, sir?
I'm okay, man. You know, since we got together last, lots of changes. Like, I'm working a new job. I think I might have mentioned it.
I think you did. I could be wrong, though.
And I haven't gone into much details, and I'm not really going to go into much details about it now, but I will say that it is, it's kicking my butt, man. There's a drinking from a fire hose. And, you know, I'll get there eventually, but ugh. This is my least favorite part of any job, is that sort of situation where you're dealing with, you know, the learning curve.
Yeah. I believe the technical term is onboarding, right?
I guess so, onboarding. Although that does sound like some promoting synergy type corporate branding for learning, but, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Mac, dude, I'm excited for this next week. I don't usually share this publicly, but my birthday is about a week away, and my wife and I have chosen to take a trip for our birthdays. We were both born close together, so next week I will not be here. We may or may not have a guest here with Mac, who knows, but I'm going to be taking a trip, and I will share the details of said trips when I return, but super excited to get out of cold Wisconsin and go do some fun things in sunny weather, and that should be good. Other than that, picked up a couple retro games over the past couple weeks. I've been debating the Analog Pocket. You're familiar with the Analog Pocket, right, Mac?
Yes, I can understand why it would be a difficult choice.
Yeah, why do you feel like it would be a difficult choice?
Well, when you consider it, the fact of playing those handheld games in a solid handheld format with a good screen, rechargeable batteries, and that HD sort of crispity crunchiness to it. It's hard to want to pass up, but that price point has usually kept me at bay.
And that's been my thing too. Now they finally have stock. And the white ones, I don't know what it is. It's just such a sexy piece of material. Like, it's such a sexy device. And, you know, having that with my Steam Deck, and the other handhelds that I have, it would just complete the family. You know what I mean? But at the same time, the rational part of me is like, I have a Steam Deck. And so do I really need another device that effectively does the same thing as handhelds that I already have? I think the answer is yes, but who knows? We'll see which way I decide to go with that. But yeah, did pick up a couple retro games.
Counterpoint, you don't not need another device.
And that's an excellent point, Mac. That's an excellent point. Because you can't take it with you, but you have a lot of fun with it while you have it, right? Mac, on that note, I say we do what we do best and hop right up in that gaming news, my friend. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. Mr. Nice Guy, I've been out of the loop without you. What is new in video games?
So much. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to episode 294 of Two Nerds in a Pod, nerdiest video game podcast in the galaxy. Today, we got some great news stories. First one is about Palworld. Now, before I even dive in, Mac, have you heard about Palworld?
It has been inescapable.
Yeah.
Yes, I have heard about Palworld. But just in the off chance that I didn't look too deeply into it, please, what's up with this?
Yeah, so I mean, this article was written 4 days ago, and I feel like it's outdated, but we're still going to read this one. This one's from GamesRadar.com by Khan Seren. Here is what he writes. Palworld keeps reaching new heights since its early access launch yesterday, January 29th, as it's now eyeing up Baldur's Gate 3 massive concurrent player peak. The survival mega hit with machine gun wielding off-brand Pokemon is a sweeping success, as it sold 2 million copies in a single day and reached a concurrent player count of 200,000 in mere hours. That peak player count has already quadrupled over the past day and now sits at an estimated 815,000, according to Steam database. It's worth noting that those whopping numbers don't come for pals logging in on Xbox Series X and S, Game Pass, or the Epic Games Store, but the game's darker twist on the monster taming subgenre is clearly drawing in crowds regardless. Elevator pitch for this is it's effectively Pokemon with guns, right? Is the quick pitch for how we would describe this. We're going to talk about some mods that have kind of come as a result of this, but I just want to get your thoughts on the general game. My understanding is it has now actually passed the top games on Steam and having over 1 million players concurrent, and has sold over 4 million copies in this first week. Any interest in this? Thoughts on this subgenre of game?
All right, well, let me start with a few questions, boundary questions. Number one, how much is it for a copy of Palworld?
I believe it is $26.99.
Okay. Definitely.
On sale. I think the default price is like 30 or something like that.
Okay. But still, even at 30, we're talking about the price of a game is half of what many titles are coming for. So that puts it kind of what we would call in an indie territory.
Correct.
Second one, I have heard many people say that Ark is kind of the more apt comparator rather than Pokemon. Ark is not a game that I played. I believe that's one that you did, though, right?
Very, very briefly, wasn't for me. I can't ever get into the crafting games.
Having not played Palworld, just putting out there that while it does have sort of monster genre stuff, feels a bit more like an open world crafter with Pokemon, rather than a sort of Pokemon centric. But people have said more Ark, less Arceus.
Yeah, I would say that's correct. And what I've seen is, you can put your pals to work in this game. You can have, a water pal make what are those spinny things that water go in? I forget what they're called.
Water wheel?
A water wheel, yeah, whatever the technical term is. You can make one of those go with a water Pokemon. You can have them, farming for you and doing different types of things. But there's guns too. And what's interesting, Mac, just to kind of add to this story and combine two in one, is that somebody made a mod that adds real Pokemon to the game. And I mean, we can all guess what happened before I even read this article, but we'll share a little bit of it, and then I want to hear your thoughts on this. This is on IGN.com. Otter who put Pokemon into Palworld says, Nintendo has come for me. And that really summarizes the whole story. Creator Toasted Shoes took to X/Twitter to tease a Palworld mod with a clip showing Pokemon's Ash Ketchum in place of the player character, as well as famous Pokemon such as Pikachu replacing Palworld's pals. Palworld is a crafting and survival game dubbed Pokemon with guns, blah, 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 blah. Bottom line is Nintendo came for him very, very quickly. My question for you as an unofficial lawyer, as someone who plays a lawyer on a podcast, is in the past, Nintendo has come after people creating their own things. Now, this is a mod. Have they done this before, do you know? And do you think that there's precedent for them to be able to shut down a mod as opposed to an individual standalone title?
Well, there absolutely is, and you don't need to be a unofficial lawyer. General intellectual property law is that you are still the one in control of your intellectual property. And that is the trade dress, of course. That covers things like that. Also covers things like straight up the characters, which are covered by copyright when you've created those and you've fixed them in a medium. So even though it is a mod to something that is not underneath their control, they absolutely can shut that down. And, whether or not they should, I know that I have a very much more live and let live idea about what fan-made games and fan-made mods should be allowed to do, especially because, and I will harp on this again, that while it is said that you can lose your copyright by not enforcing it, you can lose your patents, your copyright by not enforcing that, there has, not that I can find, been a single case And the people who think that there is are confusing common language with technical language when they say that that's the case. Intellectual property lawyers, and of which I am not, but intellectual property lawyers will tell you that that does not happen. Anyway.
Nice.
Rant aside, whether or not it's a mod for something that they don't own, or whether it's a mod on, whatever, it's still their IP with, Cyndaquil and Blastoise and so on. And they can shut that down.
I think my thing is, I think about all of the different ROMs out there.
Mm-hmm.
And, ROMs that put Super Mario Land into color or put Pokemon Red and Blue into color.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously it's literally impossible for them to stop all of those ROMs from existing. They can't even stop the base game ROM versions from existing on the internet.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, exactly right. Game preservation for the win. But it's just interesting where they choose to go. And what they choose to fight. I guess maybe even asking you if there was a precedent for them to go after it was a silly question, but I know that there's so much stuff out there that they have not gone after. It's interesting to see what they do.
Yeah, it is interesting to see them go after projects like when somebody remakes a level of Mario 64 in Unity.
Right.
To see them go after that so fast.
Right.
But not this, that, or the other. And it's who knows or dares to dream what lies in the hearts of Nintendo.
That is life. So, Mac, on to the next news story, GameSpot.com. This one is about your favorite game, Call of Duty. This is by Eddie Macic, written on January 23rd. For the launch of Modern Warfare 3, Activision released a new anti-toxicity voice moderation program that could automatically detect toxic speech and take action. Activision now says this program has been very successful so far, leading to more than 2 million accounts having action taken against them for disruptive voice chat. The program rolled out originally in North America in English only, but it has since expanded everywhere in the world except Asia and has added support for Spanish and Portuguese moderation. This voice moderation is up and running for Modern Warfare 2 and Warzone as well. Here's some stats for you. Since the voice chat moderation system debuted, Activision said Call of Duty games using the program have seen an 8% reduction in repeat offenders. Additionally, Activision reported there was about a 50% reduction in players being exposed to severe instances of toxic chat. Mac, I have some strong opinions about an M-rated game with military characters taking voice chat precautions. But as a father, I have strong opinions as well. I want to hear your perspective first. And I'm not trying to bias you with my sarcastic comment, but legitimately, online toxicity, no one is in favor of that. But what do you think about it in this type of game?
As somebody with not children, I do feel very much like, the forum that you've chosen, the venue that you've selected by playing Call of Duty and playing Call of Duty online with other people is a certain group, is a certain crew, and theoretically speaking, an M4 mature crowd. The toxicity that comes with that, the toxicity that comes with competition, frustration, anger, and is not uniquely linked to video games. I'm sorry, have you been to a sports ball game?
Right.
Have you seen a group of tailgaters interact with another group of tailgaters? That just, it's not unique to video games. We've known that this is there. Ishmobile, you don't want it to be toxic. It should be only healthy, just like the real military.
Nice.
Love the sarcasm, but yeah.
Just for context too, I believe he is a veteran. Just for context for those listening at home.
Indeed. So all put together, I will voice the non-concern about children standpoint here. Yes, that is me saying I've got it in for the kids, and not in a good way. Those kids can get off my lawn. They can get off my Call of Duty servers.
Yeah, it's as a dad, I'm a fan of things that limit the amount of blood and violence and profanity in games. I really even like that over past years, Call of Duty has implemented the ability to go in and say, hey, I don't want all the gore, even in the single player and the zombies. I don't want all the profanity in those modes either. But obviously, once you step into an online arena, you're at the mercy of the people who you're playing with unless you choose to mute them. And so I think this is a good option. I just think it is ironic that in an M-rated game with so much profanity, with so much profanity, blood, and guts, that they're now trying to limit what people say. I do agree. Like, I hate when I hop on a game and people are being racist or sexist or homophobic. It's just not a fun experience. But I just think we can't be unaware of the irony that's happening here. That's my opinion.
There's been a lot of conversations ever since we've started the sort of online sphere about the disinhibition effect of, people's willingness to engage in behavior that they would not engage in if we were in the same room or interacting, together.
Right.
That research has focused on it being a multifaceted problem. It's not just about, having a username instead of a real name. It's also not being in the same room. It's also, the delays. It's also the antagonistic nature of things. And it's hard to know what we could do to tease out those individual things and to make a healthier online environment. But part of what we do already is choose the venues that we want to interact in, whether that's a Discord set up by Mr. Nice Guy or a chat here on Twitch, our own smaller communities. It's an M-rated game, but it shouldn't be a platform for the hate.
And paying $70 does not give you the right to ruin the experience for other people.
Yeah. So, Mr. Nice Guy, I wanted to ask a question about the moderation that they're doing, the voice chat moderation.
Sure.
Did the article say much about the mechanisms by which the voice chat moderation was happening?
It doesn't. I do know that Microsoft has implemented something that allows people to effectively record clips of others saying hateful things and submitting them. Which they've always had a submitting system, but now the clips can be recorded. It's my understanding that this is something that auto-detects hate speech. Now, I don't know if that's certain words. I don't know if it's certain volume, but it sounds like it's almost like, and I hate to use the term AI, but it almost sounds like it's something in that sense.
When you have a tool like that, I should hope that there are people who are, taking the time to, because they said, we've seen an 8% decrease. And there's no doubt that 8% could be chonked down from just people being haters in general.
Yeah.
But I can't help but wonder what degree of false positives you get. And especially when we're talking about shutting somebody down in their leisure, in their recreation. I'd really hate to think that false positives were playing a role in those figures.
Yeah,
but
that's a fair point.
What we don't know is we don't know.
That's a fair point. We're going to need to wrap this segment for the sake of time, but I want to give a quick PSA in 60 seconds. Mac and I don't think either of us has ever been in favor of leaks of video games. You're ruining work that someone has put a lot of time and energy and money into, potentially taking money out of the pockets of the people who are on the lower level, the designers, the voice actors, the lesser known behind the scenes people making a video game. And so this article stood out to me on GameSpot.com. Really quickly, Eddie Macic wrote this one as well. A voice actor who claims to have worked on a canceled Batman game has said Warner Brothers scuttled the project due to leaks. Josh Keaton said on a recent Twitch livestream that he was going to play Damian Wayne in an upcoming game from WB Games Montreal that we first learned about in 2016. Keaton said he did a few voice sessions, but after the leaks, the higher-ups reportedly pulled the plug. He goes on to say that they leaked everything, the whole plot line, not only the enemies and villains, but also the concept art. And so I just wanted to say, Sometimes people think that leaks are funny. Sometimes people think that it's great to get information ahead of time. But this is an instance of leaks ruining something that could have put food in the mouths of a lot of people. And probably a great game that we would have had the opportunity to play in the Batman universe. So please don't leak stuff like this. Whether you're a disgruntled employee, a hacker, just don't do that. And that has been news for the week.
Well, now we turn to the past. What cool, interesting things have happened in video game history in this week, in years before? And I'm going to cover, mostly last week, a little bit of this week particularly. Perhaps one of the things that's lesser known but definitely deserves a spotlight. In 1990, here at the middle of January, we saw the release for Sega Genesis of the game called Herzog 2. It was a sort of proto MOBA, really, massive online battle arena, with those same sort of general ideas. Now, MOBAs would not really become much of a thing until the Warcraft 3 mod Defense of the Ancients, which would become Dota itself, and that's when we would get the MOBA genre in earnest. But I do believe that Herzog 2 and another one is like LA Future City, something like that. The name's escaping me at the moment. But those were really the founders of the MOBA genre. The integrating these sort of real-time strategy aspects with the same sort of gameplay mechanics that would later be brought together. So, and in and of itself, Herzog 2, not a bad game. But also, and perhaps overshadowed by the release on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Yes, it is worth noting that at the same time that MOBA was getting started, the ideas and the genre sensibilities being created, that's when Super Mario Bros. 3 released in the United States.
Love it.
In Japan, they got it back in October of 1988, but we in the United States had to wait for 1990, the first part of 1990, before we got our hands on it. Mr. Nice Guy, question for you.
Yeah.
Favorite world of Super Mario Bros. 3?
Oh, what a great question. And that's super tough, man. If I had to pick, I think I have the fondest memories of the Ice World. And I'm not sure why, because it's not like there were a bunch of great power-ups specific to that world. I believe it's World 6 is the Ice World. And I've always been impressed by games that can incorporate the slide mechanic. There's a really great flying world that's also a side-scrolling auto-scroller in that world. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the one I got to go with. I just love Ice World, dude.
Nice. I believe World 5, I want to say. I think that's Little Big World. And in that one, that's when we first got the boot. I love that dang boot.
Yeah, the boot's great.
The third thing I wanted to talk about, released in 2003 for the original Xbox, a game called Panzer Dragoon Orta. Now, I've got a copy of this game for my Xbox. It doesn't help me too much because my original Xbox several months back died, as you may recall, and I still have not yet gotten that back up and running. But it was the fourth installment in the Panzer Dragoon series, preceded immediately by the RPG Panzer Dragoon Saga in 1998. That was on the Sega Saturn. And it got released near the end of the Sega Saturn life cycle, so only a very small number of copies of that game ever shipped. And it still goes for like over $1,000 and is considered one of the best RPGs, not just of the Sega Saturn, but also regularly makes best, top 100 of all times list, in addition to top 100 RPGs of all time.
Nice.
On the heels of an incredible game that was great at the time and has stood the test of time since then was we get Panzer Dragoon Orda. The first two in the Panzer Dragoon series were on-rails shooters. And Orda, going back to those roots, was declared at the time to be the best rail shooter of all time, and I think it's still pretty high up there. They made this for the Xbox, right? But they originally considered making it for the GameCube. But according to an interview with the director that got translated after it was published, thanks to the good work over at Shmupulations, which is a great website that translates interviews from Japan and from periodicals and such and puts it up in English for all to see. Thank you. That the winds were kind of blowing toward Xbox because they thought that Microsoft's expertise with PC games would make it easier for them to do bigger things and especially multiplayer things with their games. They were like, Microsoft's taking the online stuff more seriously and we want to try that stuff out. And that kind of plays into their original plans for Orda wasn't actually going to be a rail shooter, but they were going to do an online top-down real-time strategy game. And that very much was just like, well, Xbox is going to give us the ability to do online, multiplayer games easier than GameCube. So, yeah, let's work with Microsoft.
Yeah, 100%.
This was a delayed title, and it was delayed in large part because until very late in the production, they were planning on having a much more open world game for you to fly your dragon around in and do all these things, because that's what they went with this, classic fly on your dragon, shoot down enemies in the sky and such. But they kind of cut that because they were like, oh man, that just makes it a bit too bland because it doesn't feel intentional with the game design, and so they went back to that on rails. It catches some crap for being a very short game experience, not having that many levels, but the difficulty certainly makes up for it. And I think probably one last real cool thing about Orda before we leave history is that Panzer Dragoon Orda shipped with an entire port of Panzer Dragoon, of the original, that was ported, reworked so that it would work on the Xbox and is an unlockable in the game. So you play Panzer Dragoon Orda and then you think, you know what? I want to play the original. Bam, it's right there on the disc. Now, the only thing that would have been more amazing is if they had incorporated Panzer Dragoon Saga, the RPG, onto the Xbox game. That would be incredible. And especially because there hasn't been a re-release of Saga, and there's no word that there's gonna be one. The only way to get at it these days is drop that 100 bones or do some emulation. But
1,000 bones, right? Not 100, but 1,000, right?
Oh, yeah, that's right. 1,000. Did I say 100? I definitely meant 1,000.
Yeah, you're good, man. 1,000.
Alas, and alack. But nonetheless, Panzer Dragoon Orda, definitely an important moment, if not several moments, in video game history.
Nice. Love to hear it. Mac, let's move on to a segment that we haven't done for a couple weeks, because we've been talking about games of the year, both on the indie side and on the AAA. Shout out again to our good friend Spinus the Menace, who joined us last week. But Mac, now we're bringing back Indie Game of the Week. Yeah, a game, or rather a segment where we talk about a game that may deserve more attention and tell you if it deserves your attention. Now, Mac, we're off to a hot start. Shout out to developers that have sent us games so far this year. Last year, I believe we did 21 or so games. I'm thinking we're going to beat that record this year.
I think you're right.
First game of the year is called Knights of the Rogue Dungeon. Shout out to the developer, Atui LLC, for sending us codes for this game. Game was released January 4th, 2024. Currently $9.99 on Steam, $9.99. Here's the description. Cleanse the rogue dungeon of 3 demon knights as you battle through the depths in this addicting roguelike dungeon hopper from the creators of Mutant Mudds and Zeo Drifter. Both of those are games that I have played, and I enjoyed both of them. this game, Mac, currently sits at 1 user review on Steam. Now, granted, it just came out January 4th, but I'd love to hear your thoughts, and then we'll discuss. What did you think about this game?
Okay, so for some background, the game itself very much has a Q*bert vibe to it.
Yep.
If you haven't played Q*bert before, we're talking an isometric view, a fixed isometric view, where you bounce from higher elevations to lower elevations. You move from spot to spot. Occasionally there are things that are in the way or areas that you can't jump. And in Q*bert, you would have to sometimes do specific jump movements. It was a puzzler with some enemies around. This one's a lot less of a puzzler because you don't so much have to hit specific tiles a specific amount of times, so much as you need to hit them all at least once and survive.
Yep.
Additionally, there's a roguelike element, so, you'll die, go back to the beginning until you unlock a new area. You can unlock some power-ups as well that make certain things easier and so on. Okay. So, nice guy. I enjoy Knights of the Rogue Dungeon.
Okay.
It definitely has that sort of give me another, one more try, one more go. Let me get just a little bit farther. I do, however, I'm not entirely convinced that the balance is just there yet. Particularly with the amount that you have to put down to get a power up versus, what you're doing. So I did make it past the first boss, and I'm into World 3, but I haven't made it to the end of World 3 and into World 4. I just keep either messing up or keep just, painting myself into a corner before I wind up getting as far along as I would like. And some of those power-ups to get, extra chances, extra lives are, 2,500 a pop, whereas I feel like I come away from a run with something closer to 250 at most. So it's is a little rough there, and I can only see it getting a bit rougher, but maybe that's just because I need to get good.
Well, for context, so first of all, everything Max said is correct. For context, as you're going through these levels, you're collecting coins. I don't know if you said that explicitly. And every time you get hit by an enemy, it's one hit and you die. And so every time you get hit, you lose 50% of your coins.
Unless...
Yeah, exactly. Unless there is a power-up you can buy that decreases the amount of coins that you lose. So that's good. And there's other power-ups you can buy that do other things. I think that this is effectively a Q*bert clone with a Minecraft Dungeons skin on it. It has that Minecraft Dungeons look to it. And I agree with you about it being, the one more run, pick up and play. You can play for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and have a good time. I just don't really know with this game what the hook is. Like, what is going... other than the fact that it's a roguelite, what is going to make me come back to this over and over again over other indie games that I have access to? Over playing just Q*bert in emulation. It's a fun game, and I don't want to be insulting, but to me, this is almost like a game that you play in browser, if that makes sense. Those games you'd be in class, and, the teacher's not paying attention, and everyone has, their computer, and everyone's playing this game, and, hey, did you play this game online? Here's the link. To me, $9.99 is not an unreasonable price. But I just don't know if the replay value is there for me. I don't know if you'd agree. Is this something that you're motivated or interested in continuing to play over and over again to unlock everything? What's your stance there?
I found it to be very frustrating, especially at the beginning, because I had this mindset that I could there's a limited number of sort of boards that you will get, so you will start seeing the same boards over and over again, and if you can keep from retracing over your own path, you will wind up keeping your ability to kill monsters. But once you step on your own path again, you can't get hit or you'll die. But if you're powered up, hitting them, you'll be fine. So there is this aspect where you're kind of go in expecting to be able to perfect run a board and keep your power up the whole way through. But that is not possible. And I need to emphasize it, especially there are several times where the places where it places you. And so, like, I found it very frustrating at first because I was in this mindset of trying to make it perfect. But when I kind of embraced that I wasn't going to be able to ever perfect any of the things, it actually got more fun for me. So I think your point still stands, Mr. Nice Guy, that it's hard to say what will bring you back to this game, but the number of hours that, I've put into it already, like, I feel like I definitely got my gameplay's worth out of it, even if I never come back to this again.
For sure.
So I don't think it necessarily needs replayability so much, because I think it does have a good enough, like, hey, let's get you in, let's get you on, let's get you playing and sinking some time into it. But it would be nice if it was a bit more robust.
Yeah.
Because, I would love a reason to come back a bit more.
And to clarify, it's a blessing and a curse that we all have these expansive Steam libraries, right? Mm-hmm. And that people have access to, if you have PlayStation Plus. I looked at my PlayStation Plus the other day, hundreds of games in there that I have never touched. Wow. And so for me, for a game to really make me want to keep coming back, there has to be some type of hook. And to me, this game does not have it. Now, I think that Max summarized it well in that he said he had fun with it. I, too, had fun with this game. It'd be fun if there was, like, I don't know if there's leaderboards or if there was some type of beat someone's score in terms of time. I think that would make it a little bit more interesting. But because this runs so well on the Steam Deck, it's something that if I want to play a game and I don't have 20 minutes and I just want to hop in and mess around for a little bit, I might go to this. This is probably one of like half a dozen games that I'd go back to. At $9.99, I don't know. I'm a little bit on the fence. I do think that this is a well-made game that deserves more attention. But unlike some of the games we've reviewed in the past, I can't just recommend this without reservation because it doesn't have anything to me that makes it super special. It's a well-made game without any bugs that does what it's supposed to do, and it could fill a space in your library if you have some spare time. That's how I describe it.
I don't necessarily disagree with anything you've said. I'm not sure I'll go with you on your conclusion, though. I think it's there for me. It has arrived. I do wish it was balanced a little bit differently. And not having... There's still, I think, 2 more worlds that I haven't even experienced yet. In the third world, they add a segment where there's, like, spikes that pop up as you go. So it's certainly a situation where you also need to be a bit more cognizant of your timing as well when you move.
Sure.
So, but I quite enjoy it so far, and I'm, good on you guys.
Well done. Thank you for the game. If you think this might interest you, add it to your wish list, and hopefully they get more reviews. They definitely deserve more than one review. And that has been Indie Game of the Week.
All right. Well, now we turn to a project that's trying to get off the ground. We call this Kick or Kickstart. I have posted a link in the chat, and I know this might not be everyone's game, but I definitely like it. This is called Boba Bar Bubble Tea Tycoon. And in the vein of usual, game tycoon-style games, the point is that you are running a sort of business, if you will. And that business happens to be running a boba bar bubble tea stand in a world full of cats. Cute, pixel art style cats. They come round, they buy boba tea from you, and then they go off on their way. They buy more, you upgrade your shop, you add new recipes, you do all these things. There is something so very cozy about this type of game. Again, I know it's not for everybody, but it's not high stress like Cook Serve Delicious. It's a bit more low stress, kind of like Reciteer. It for some people really scratches an itch. This is a style, a genre of games that I have dipped my toe in before and come away feeling very good. And this one looks cutesy. I like it. But let's get to some stats. $8 buy-in. It's in Australian dollars, so $8. It's like 10 Australian, which is 8 American. Buy-in for the digital copy. There's a playable demo on Steam. The release is supposed to be Q1 2024, so not that far away. It's going to release Steam first, Android release eventually, and maybe theoretically, hypothetically on Switch, but that doesn't seem too frightfully likely. And as a fun little add-on, for $133, you can help design one of the customers that walks up to the game. So if you're the type of person who wants to have an NPC, if you will, that has, some of your flair and touch, that is an option for a somewhat reasonable $133. I'd love to see it lower because then I'd go for it. But as far as we see design your character type things, that's not a bad price point. Anyway, now the downside, of course, is that it looks like they are struggling to reach their full funding goal of $3,300.
They are.
And so far it's not quite at half. It still has more than 10 days left to go, so it could still go the distance. It could still make it. And I'd certainly like to see it. What I've seen so far has been promising. But Mr. Nice Guy, any thoughts to share?
So it's interesting because at first glance, this is not my type of game, but I think about other games where I've done similar things like Overcooked. It was not as much about inventory management and things like this appears to be, but these cozy games that are just about fun, I need more of them in my life. No blood, no guns, no real competition except going against yourself. You sit down at the end of the day after doing whatever it is you do for work, no matter who you are, and maybe you don't want something stressful. Maybe you want to sell boba tea, like in all seriousness. And so I think this type of game definitely has a space. The art style is very much a cutesy style. And it makes me think back to, I think it was like the early 2000s when Farmville was such a huge thing. Do you remember Farmville, Mac? Yeah, I never played it, but I heard a lot.
I do remember Farmville, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that there's a space for these types of games and that people want them. Dave the Diver last year, one of the biggest indies of the year that I actually never got to play, was in part an inventory management game. You're diving, you're catching fish, you're running a sushi restaurant. And so this is not derivative of that at all. This definitely appears to be its own thing, but has some similar elements. And I think that at $8, this is excellent. I think this deserves to be made.
Yeah, a very inexpensive price point. And if the demo's any indication, I think it'll do just fine. Scratches an itch. I'll already throw it out there. I say kickstart because I think this is good, and it does, while it's not my main genre, it's something that I do like. And $8, great price point, playable demo, heck yes, checks the boxes. Kickstart for me.
Yeah, and kickstart for me, the other awesome thing about this is April 2024 is the projected release date. So, I mean, they're not going to say, oh, we needed a year, now we need two. I mean, I think that they legitimately just need this $3,300 to get over the hump, get their game made, and then in a couple months you'll be able to play it. So I say kickstart as well.
Well, if you disagree with us, let us know. Just yell it out. We are tabulating the results from here. But that has been Kick. or kickstart.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, time for our next segment called Nerd Flex.
Woo-hoo.
A segment where you, the viewers, try to stump the hosts. Sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't. Now, Mac, didn't you release like an extra episode last week of Two Nerds? Was it based on this segment, if I remember correctly? I didn't get to listen yet.
Yes, indeed. Walk of Shame is what I called it. Basically, shame on us, but good on you guys. It was a compilation of all those questions that you put into the chat that we got wrong, all in one convenient package, looking back at 2023. So there are people who stumped us more than others, and they received accolades specifically. Now, we could do a victory lap with all of the questions that we got right.
Yeah.
But that would take way too much time for me to edit, and, so that's not going to be happening. But yes, indeed. And I think that's the type of thing that I think I'm probably going to continue doing going forward.
Nice.
Those walks of shame on us.
Love it. We're not too cocky to take the walk of shame. I love it. I love the idea. Well, cool. Let's dive in. We're going to go straight to the bank, Mac.
Woo.
We're going straight to the bank today. Like 50 Cent. Test bank question number 1. This one's red, and I think I know the answer to it. In the Super Mario Brothers movie, what part of New York were the brothers from? In the Super Mario Brothers movie, what part of New York were the brothers from? This one's red, which means it's supposed to be hard, right?
Yeah. Well,
what are your thoughts? I think I know.
Brooklyn is where my first thought is.
Right.
But, I guess Queens could be, maybe it's one of those where they're actually from Queens or something like that instead of Brooklyn.
Pretty sure it's not Queens. I think it's Brooklyn.
All right. Why don't you, let's do Brooklyn. Let's go for it.
Okay, Brooklyn, final answer. Yeah, it's Brooklyn. I don't feel like that's a tough question.
Yeah, me neither.
It could have said something tricky like they're from the sewers or something like that. But no, it's Brooklyn. So that one was a gimme. What do we have next? I click this random button, and some of these are too easy, but we're going to go with it because it's the one that popped up. So this is it's easy for me. This is a first-person shooter question. Who is the quote-unquote handsome antagonist in Borderlands 2?
Oh.
Now, I know the answer to this. Mac, have you played it? I know with certainty what it is.
So I've played Borderlands briefly, but I also played Tales from the Borderlands, and this same character features in there, and I think his name's Handsome Jack.
It is Handsome Jack, and this is another very easy one. This one's actually green, though, so we knew it's supposed to be easy. Let's see. It is indeed Handsome Jack.
For a bit of added stuff, I believe he's like head of Hyperion or something like that, one of the companies, right? A little bit of lore.
Yeah, he's like the CEO of one of those. I believe so, dude. Good job.
Nah.
We need to have my buddy T. Yankum in here, who's a Borderlands wizard. He knows it all. We're actually doing a playthrough right now of Borderlands 3, but I'll talk about that later when we get to what we're watching and what we're playing. So, third question, Mac. This is another red one, and it's so funny because this is a game that I play regularly when I'm flying places, because you can beat it in like 30 to 40 minutes, and so I play this game a lot. It's a Mario question. Who is the final boss in Super Mario Land?
So Super Mario Land is that's a Game Boy game, right?
Yeah, I assume it's referring to the one on the Game Boy.
Okay. So
and I'll just tell you, unless you have a guess, I know what it is.
No, we'll go with you.
It's like a flying chicken.
So is it Alfred Chicken?
It's not Alfred Chicken, but shout out to Alfred Chicken on Game Boy. Very underrated game. Please go play it. I'll say that. That's a hill I'm willing to die on. I wonder if they're looking for like the actual character name, which I do not know, but it's effectively like a flying bird, flying chicken that squeaks when you shoot it. So let's see what the answer is. We're 2 for 2 so far. Okay, so I don't know if I can count this one.
Okay.
Because the correct answer is Tatanga. And if you were to Google Tatanga, you'll see, in fact, let me just Google it real quick.
Interesting. So he's like this purple guy with ears in a, in a ship of some type.
Okay, so maybe I'm not correct. I thought it was a flying... Oh, that's right. It is... Yeah, I was wrong, actually.
Oh.
This is the final boss. It's not the flying chicken. What level is the flying chicken? Oh, I think... So here's what it is. Before you get to Tatanga, that's where you fight the flying chicken. Once you kill the flying chicken, then Tatanga comes. I just remembered. So I was wrong about that.
Well, hey, you know what? 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
Yeah, spoiler alert, Ishmopil says in the chat. That has been Nerdflex this week.
All right. Well, now we turn to a little bit of legalese.
Legalese.
I'm not a lawyer. I just play one here on a podcast, and we have spoken a lot about Billy Mitchell v. Twin Galaxies over the years.
Yes.
And it did break news. I was very disappointed because it broke news just before we were set to record last week, and I didn't get to talk about it, so I'm talking about it now, even though it is kind of old news here. So... over the holiday break, I was keeping watch on this case. And matter of fact, I've got a pile of cases that I keep on this sort of pile of stuff that I keep my eyes on because we've talked about it. I'm going to come back to it. And when I checked back in, late December, the trial was set for March. And then before we were going to record last week, I checked back and saw that there was no longer an upcoming trial date, but rather just a hearing scheduled, which I thought was weird. And then it wasn't until like a couple days before we recorded that I finally saw that there was notice that there was going to be some bit of a dismissal. So I am both excited and saddened to bring you up to speed on a bit of a problem.
What?
David Tashraudian, right? I hope I'm saying that right. He is the Twin Galaxies lawyer, and he admitted to the court to doing, and he apologized for doing something legally unethical. Specifically, he tried to contact some of the opposition witnesses directly, and that's not something you're supposed to do as a lawyer. You're supposed to only reach out to opposition witnesses through their legal counsel only.
Right.
So that is something that he filed. He said, I am sorry, Your Honor, I did this. It was unethical. He threw himself on the mercy of the court for that. So that was something that was coming up on the 11th, and I was just like, oh, hot dang. But there was another thing that was supposed to come up on January 11th. And that was a hearing to discuss not just what was going to happen to David, who's the lawyer for Twin Galaxies, but also for the judge to hold a hearing on how much or / whether to fine Billy Mitchell for perjury that he committed in depositions, and the evidence that Billy and his lawyers engaged in both spoliation, that's the destruction of evidence, as well as the manufacture of evidence.
Oh, boy.
So there was going to be a hearing on 3 things. 1, what to do about the Twin Galaxies lawyer and his contacting witnesses, which he should not have done, and also a hearing on the claims of destruction of evidence, manufacture of evidence, and the perjury. Now, the perjury count we can mention because we have tax documents showing that Billy Mitchell was on the board of a specific organization that he directly claimed in depositions he was not and had never been on a board member of that board, which is important for reasons that I won't go into, but he repeatedly claimed that that was not the case. He had never been on the board of this, and, people came with receipts.
How do you claim that you're not the member of a board when you've been on the board? Boards have board meetings, and they keep minutes. Case closed, right? Yep. That's all I had to say about that.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about it is that, their evidence was, number 1, the tax documents showing that you were a board member, and from the board, as well as the testimony of people who were board members at the time, and were like, one of them was like, I resigned over Billy Mitchell being put on this board because I did not think it was appropriate for him to be on this board. It was a stupid thing to lie about. January 11th, when they were supposed to show up for that hearing, Billy announces that they've reached a settlement and they don't need to hold their hearing. And the judge is like, okay, I guess we don't need to do this hearing. Keep in mind that Billy was the one who started the case. This is a case where he sued Twin Galaxy for defaming him. He's the plaintiff. He has controlled over the past 4 years whether or not this case continues forward or whether or not he settles it or dismisses it. Right. He has been in control this entire time. He decided to drop it the morning of the 11th. Now, it's not a good look for Twin Galaxy's lawyer, but I'm just saying he picked the final hour to drop it just before finding out what he's going to get slapped with. So clearly somebody had a desire to drop it before that. That's all I'm saying. The details of the settlement are non-public, as all settlements are. You know, Mr. Nice Guy, I want documents. I want to read. I want to see what happened, but we will never know because this will be non-public. Billy will say he won. Twin Galaxies will say they won.
I thought that his scores got reinstated. I thought I read that recently. Is that not correct?
That is not correct. His scores were not reinstated.
What?
His scores show up on essentially a Wayback Machine where they say, look at the old scoreboard, not on the current stuff.
I don't know if what you're saying is correct.
Okay, that could have changed.
But I could be wrong. I'm just looking at I'm looking at an IGN article from a week ago. It says
go to Twin Galaxies though. Go to Twin Galaxies. We will fact check me live. Go on to Twin Galaxies and see if we can't find that. This is worth it. I do not want to cut show until we know whether or not I'm right or wrong.
Okay, so I'm on Twin Galaxies. I'm going to go to Donkey Kong because I know Donkey Kong is one of the games that he... Yeah, I think you're actually correct because I'm looking at top 10 scores and I'm not seeing him on here.
Indeed. But there should be an archival button somewhere on there to show you what the scoreboard used to look like. And that does have Billy Mitchell's scores on the archived stuff. But then again, you know who else's scores show up on there?
Who's that?
Todd Rogers, the guy who it is impossible for his scores on Dragster to have been done. So a lot of people on there who have been removed because of cheating are there on the archival boards.
Nice.
His scores do not appear, and I don't believe they will appear. But that's the thing. I don't know, Mr. Nice Guy. What are the terms in the settlement? I don't know. We will probably never know, and that is very, very this. Now, I do need to give some credit to Eagle-Eyed Legal Mind Manatee Time, who, being similarly interested in this case, pointed out that the countersuit that Twin Galaxies filed against Billy might still be happening. According to her, a countersuit is considered a separate lawsuit and won't be prevented going forward. However, and I will quote her directly, quote, with that being said, a lot of times the parties will file dismissal or settlement paperwork in the first lawsuit that indicates that the other party is also going to dismiss their countersuit if the initial dismissal was a result of an agreement between the parties. And that was a conversation we had gearing up for this. And as I have pulled up the docket right now, it appears as though late yesterday, indeed, it is both the suit and Twin Galaxies' countersuit has also been dismissed as well, which is also unsatisfying because I was hoping that would stay around so that we would then have a source for documents. But alas, and alack, we shall have none. This will be forever a question because those details aren't public. And unsatisfying as it is, but that is the very unsatisfying truth of legalese in our day and age.
Nice. Well, thank you for that, Mac. And before we wrap today, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate y'all. We have one last segment called What We've Been Watching and What We've Been Playing, where we talk about just that. The cool, nerdy stuff we've been into across all platforms. What have you been watching and playing? And chat, what have you been watching and playing?
I've been fit to be tied, not been watching and playing much. I've been playing, of course, our indie game this week, Knights of the Rogue Dungeon. That's what I've been playing. As for watching, I have been mostly watching Dimension 20, specifically A Court of Fae and Flowers, as well as Taskmaster Season 11, working my way backward through the seasons. And I did get a chance to play some Dungeons & Dragons this week, which was fun. Both a little bit of a thing that I'm teaching, as well as one that I'm playing. So that's been a good time. What about you, Mr. Nice Guy?
Nice. I've actually had time to watch a few shows lately. One of the best ones that I've been watching is Walking Dead: Dead City. We all know that The Walking Dead ended, but they've actually put together several spin-offs, one with Daryl Dixon, one with Maggie and Negan, which is Walking Dead: Dead City, and one that is going to start in February with Rick and Michonne, which I'm excited for as well. Almost done with Dead City, and that's been really good. My wife and I started a new show this past week, in fact yesterday, called 007 Road to a Million, where they take real people. They're often in the wilderness, they're doing different things, and they have to do these challenges that relate to James Bond in some way, where they win different amounts of money based on the challenges. Great show, really enjoying that. As far as what I've been playing, I alluded to the fact that I'm doing a run-through of some of the Borderlands 3 DLC with my good friend Tiankum. Looking through my Steam Deck library, I've been playing a lot of retro games lately. One game that I want to mention that I just started, and I immediately thought this is a Maction game, is Disco Elysium. Have you ever played Disco Elysium, Mac?
I have not, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's great. I know that you like story-based games. This one has a lot of dialogue and exploration. Additionally, based on the skills that the player has acquired, you can attempt to do different things, and there's almost a Dungeon and Dragons style dice roll that determines success and failure. So I have really been having a lot of fun with this game, and it's one of those games you can pick a build and then play through it multiple times. We'll see if I like it enough to do that. And then, just playing a bunch of other games that we have for review that I will not discuss right now. Mac, my good man, would you take us home, please?
Thank you for coming out and being part of the show. Episode 294 would not have been the same without you. Join us for these live shows, twitch.tv/2nerdsinapod. That's with the number 2, of course. And put Mr. Nice Guy and I in our place with your nerdy trivia. Until next time, keep it nerdy, everybody, and we'll see you later. Bye.
Be excellent to each other. See ya. Bye.